There aren't many tying materials that are more fun to watch in the water than the dragon tail. These glorified pipe cleaners wiggle and flutter constantly and have hypnotized many a predator into biting. This jig-style pattern makes great use of the tail and a few other simple materials to create a killer warm water streamer. To start, tie in your head above the bend next to the hook eye. We'll add some dumbbell eyes here. This will make the hook ride point side up, and popping the weight up from this end each strip will make our dragon tail buck nicely. Once I've made a few turns to get the eyes in position, there are two techniques I use to really lock them in. The first involves wrapping your thread over both eyes and under the shank in between to tie them in from above. Here's a top-down view of this motion. Again, we're going over the eyes and under the shank. Do this a bunch of times until you start to see a small buildup of thread in these sections. Then move to step 2. Bring your thread under the eyes and over the shank to tie the eyes in from below. You'll notice the wraps you did above the eyes start to get pulled in tighter from this motion. Again, here's a top-down view of what this looks like. Once your eyes are secure, you can keep laying a thread base down to where the hook starts to bend. I'll add some glue to the wraps I did on the eyes after I finish the fly at the end. Above the bend, snip a short piece of thin monofilament line from your kit, form a loop, and lay it down with the loop facing rearward and extending to just beyond the apex of the hook bend. This will be a fouling guard for our long tail. Bind both tag ends at the top of the shank with tight, close wraps. You can even go back and forth a couple of times to really lock them down. Then snip any remaining tags. Now the moment you've all been waiting for, dragon tail time. You can pretty much tie this in at the length it is, though I usually take a lighter or super glue to the tip section just to make this material more durable. I tied this in a bit above the hook point, ensuring that it rests naturally on the mono fouling guard. Give yourself the whole hook shank to tie this in, including some of the thicker, non-tapering part of the tail on your wraps. Once the tail is binded down well, bring your thread back to the initial tying point. You could add some super glue to your tail's tying if you want. If I hadn't realized my bottle had glued itself shut before filming this, I'd probably be doing that. Next, grab a clump of pearl angel hair and gently straighten and align the strands. Starting on one side of the shank, lay them down and take a few loose wraps to tie in. I'll quickly flatten them to the shank so that they wrap the whole 180 degrees around this top section before locking in. Then invert your hook and do the same on the bottom of the shank. You can cut the front-facing tags, or just fold them back and take a few more wraps. These flies are not meant to be clean. Now we'll begin the rest of the body, starting with some white craft fur. I found the best way to give this section a nice wide profile is by reverse tying in the chunks, so I'll demonstrate a rough way that I do it here. Take a decent sized chunk and position it on one side of the shank just above where you tied in your angel hair, with the tips facing forward. Take a couple of loose wraps, then use your thumb to splay the hair around this section, ensuring that there are no gaps in coverage on the top 180 degrees. Then, like we did with our angel hair, invert your hook and repeat the process with another chunk of craft fur, covering the other side to meet the top craft fur where it ends. Take tighter wraps to lock this in. Go at the tag ends with your scissors and snip them down. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be short enough so that it doesn't get in the way of the fibers we're about to fold back. Then, gently brush the front-facing fibers towards the back of your fly, gathering them in your non-bobbin hand and kind of pulling them towards the hook bend. Wetting your hand before you do this is also a great way to get more control over the fur. When most of the craft fur is brushed back, pin the clumps close to their base and take tight wraps over this section to secure. If I had a working bottle of super glue, I'd glue this section as well. Finally, take a brush to the fur to free any matted fibers. Take a few wraps above your white craft fur. We'll now repeat this process with our chartreuse craft fur. Again, tie in 2 chunks facing forward, ensure that they cover around the shank completely, then brush back and secure. You should have space to do this one more time with a smaller chunk of chartreuse fur. Do the same process so that your last reverse tie has the craft fur splaying out right from behind the dumbbell eyes. Take wraps to cover any exposed folds here, then bring your thread to in front of the eyes on the exposed shank. Use your whip finisher to tie off in this section, then snip your excess. Go to some more super glue or UV resin to lock in the finishing wraps and wraps around the dumbbell eyes. Your dragon tail is now ready to roll. I like fishing this with long, slow pulls followed by pauses to unlock all of the movement in this material. The tail holds a lot of water when wet, so I definitely recommend throwing this on a rig that can turn it over well. A short, stiff leader and a beefy 8-weight or more. Hope you put it to use soon. Thanks for watching.